Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I'm so happy the coach is back. I call him the coach. Yeah, he is the guy that's going to transform your life. And he's Dan Clark. He is a life coach, and he's with transformedlife.net. Dan, great having you back.
Oh my gosh, great to be back in, Steve. Steve, thanks so much.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about a number of things that are so important in life, personally, professionally. Intentionality, you told me just before we went on, is one of the things that we're going to talk about. And I'm trying to think of how that translates. The word intentionality, obviously, there has to be intention, but that's all I got. So enlighten us.
Well, intentionality is kind of an idea of what I want to do intentionally, but intentionality is how I live my life. Let me give you an example. Yesterday it was 75 degrees in Missouri. Today it's like 42. It's going to be 37. So I had to get a whole bunch of stuff done yesterday. My yards, I'm trying to get caught up, right? So I took my mower to get it fixed. I'm cutting down some limbs, got some property here taking care of about 11 acres. And so I'm out and back. So intentionality yesterday was to get everything done that I wanted to get done. And things don't always go the way that you want them to. So even though you're intentional, it's learning how to flow with the things that that happen unexpectedly. That's what intentionality is.
Okay, so you had a plan, you try to execute the plan, some things derail. How do you deal with them? How do you go there?
Well, it's learning how to flow with things as they show up. For example, I had planned on cutting a couple of limbs out of this tree that I was working on and trying to clear in some area. I'm thinking about maybe planting a little bit of, maybe plant some potatoes and some carrots this year and some peppers. I love peppers and something to make salsa. And as I'm clearing this out, I didn't recognize how bad this little area is. About, I don't know, it's probably 100 by 100 feet, how bad it was. And I got just run over by the bushes and I got a scratch on my face with the tree. And I was like, you just get frustrated with things as they're going along. But learning how to flow with that is that you flow with what needs to happen. Like it took me a lot longer than I wanted to. And then my neighbor showed up and he spent 45 minutes talking to me about stuff, and so you have all this stuff that's going along. So intentionality, again, is about learning how to be okay with, even though it's an intention, it's not like an absolute, you have to get it done like a goal. You're just flowing with it.
How do you manage, Dan, when things don't go your way in whatever situation it is, without getting frustrated, without getting anxious, without, I don't dare I say depressed, but how do you do that?
Well, I don't know how anybody does that really, because we are going to have those things that trigger us. And that's really one of the things that I focus on with someone. I mean, you always bring up such great questions, like when we get triggered, like when you sit with someone, a friend, or you're having a conversation with someone, and as they're talking to you, you get this feel for how the relationship is going, right? Or how things are going in the conversation. However, when something is said and it triggers you and you go off where you're not present, you're thinking about something else while they're talking, right? That's where it's difficult to bring yourself back to be present. So how you flow with things is to be present and to be with what's happening. I think we talked about this last time, which is always already thinking. If you can get that to go away, it's very, very powerful. Like, for example, this morning, I was meeting with a couple of guys. I just love them to death. And we were talking and I was having all kinds of emotions about the things that were happening. And we were in a public restaurant, so I was somewhat kind of holding them back, but I was allowing myself to be present and hearing what they were saying about their lives and my life. And when you flow with those things, you allow yourself to fully experience the moment. I mean, I want to talk about this for a second because I love the way Brendon Burchard talks about this. And I've been practicing this for about 3 years now since I've been involved with his material. I'm actually a high performance coach with him, and I love the way he presents this. He talks about cultivating the emotion that you want to feel in the day. What we don't do is we don't intentionality set out to feel a certain way in the day. We just usually let the emotions show up as they show up.
Sure.
Well, why can't we intention to feel a particular emotion that day? Now, your brain will find what you're looking for, right? And so if I choose to experience joy with my friends this morning and conversation that is fulfilling for me, then guess what's going to happen? I'm choosing how I want to feel with them. That is intentionality.
Interesting. You put that, and I put it. And by the way, any questions I pose to you come from personal experience. So I deal with the same kind of stuff that I think everybody else does. But going with the flow. And about a year ago, I was talking to this girl and she said to me, you gotta live in the moment because I'm a planner. And I've gotten away from a lot of that, but and I always try to center myself back to it. You got to live in the moment. And sometimes when things don't go the way you want them to, you're not really living in the moment. You're worrying about them. It's like, this is the way it is. Let's just go with that and then on to the next thing.
So let me focus on that for a moment about clarity, because if we don't have an intention for our life, like who I am, what I want, and where I'm going, then if we're flowing, we're going to get distracted. Like yesterday, it was late in the day and I wanted to find something to eat. So I'm driving down the highway. Let me tell you a funny story. I had my mom on the phone. She's 95, lives 4 hours away. And I'm like, Mom, I'm hungry. I don't know what to eat. So I'm driving down the highway and I'm mentioning all the restaurants what I'm wanting to eat, And so I finally go back to the same place I always eat. Now, why I'm saying that to you is because we get into these habits, automatic behaviors. And if we don't have an intention, we'll go back to the thing that's always safest. So part of intentionality is clarity, is knowing who I am, what I want, and where I'm going. If you have those things decided, then you don't get distracted by the automatic things that show up. Like you go shopping, you buy too much sugar, or you catch yourself doing something that you really don't want to do, or being somewhere you didn't know you want to be there because you're not intentional about what you want to do before you start the day.
Interesting. Why is it that a lot of times when you say go back to something that's comfortable, why do we sometimes go back to things that aren't good for us in terms of an emotion? Like, I know you know where I'm going with this, but you go back to feeling those things that you feel comfortable with, and it could be something from your past, but it kind of is your baseline. How do you get away from going back to those?
It's called being present. So you can't like something today that you haven't liked in the past. Okay.
Let's process that. You can't like something today that you didn't like in the past.
Yeah, so that means that what you're leaning toward is something that you've always liked. So if you want to get out of that mode, then you got to be curious about what in the hell you're doing, what you're thinking about, right? Like, why am I thinking this thought? You're aware of, and you're present, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm thinking these thoughts again. Like, for example, I was working with a client day before yesterday, and she was like, I caught myself driving into Walmart and buying potato chips again, Dan, thinking, yeah, right. And we all know that we have comfort food right? Sometimes whatever we do with that, I catch myself doing that same thing. And that is where we're not aware of the thoughts that actually is creating the behavior. So how you're present is you're present with yourself, not just the person that you're with or what's happening around you, the thoughts that you're having. And that's how you become really very good at paying attention to what you don't want to do. And don't catch yourself doing that automatic behavior. I want to go back to my story yesterday. My friends this morning were talking about how I have a narrow band of things that I like to do, right? And I think I'm more open than that, right? And I was a little hurt by that a little bit because I think I am, but I'm really very structured like you are, like how I like my life to be. So I pretend to be open about lots of things, but when it comes to certain things, like what I'm going to eat, I'm not very open. And so curiosity, willing to try more things, is how we become more I think alive and present, and we experience with things, and even being willing to own who we are and our thoughts that we're having. Like, again, yesterday, I'm just like all of us, we get in these patterns. The reason I said we can't like today what we didn't like in the past, that's why we're in patterns. If we start choosing to like different things, it changes the pattern.
Not easy to do, though, for a lot of people.
Me or you? No.
Yeah, because guess what? I eat the same thing for breakfast every single day. Sometimes I'll change a piece of it up. When's your birthday, by the way?
I'm in June.
Oh, okay. And the reason I ask that is I'm a Virgo, so by trait, it's kind of anal retentive, do kind of the same stuff. I'm getting out of that. So you would be a Gemini?
I'm a Gemini, so that creates all kinds of things because there's two of us.
There is two of us, yes. Interesting. Okay. And like your friend with the potato chips, she went back in to go buy them, but what triggered her to go buy them?
Well, again, it's mindlessness. She was just having a difficulty with stress in her life. And the next thing she knows, and I've caught myself doing that same thing. Now, how we handle that, though, and this is the important part, is there's no blame here. It's like, oh, I can't believe I did that. No, you enjoy it. You eat what you want to eat of them and you throw the rest of them away. I mean, there's no shame and guilt in catching yourself in an old pattern. Just when you catch yourself in an old pattern, just be fun about it. Have joy, have lightweight, be a kid about it and think, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful that I'm here. But you move past it, right? Because you're going somewhere. You allow yourself lots of room.
I think a big key to a lot of this is finding joy in something new, even though it's the smallest thing, even though it's the littlest thing. Wow, I'm going to do something different, something new. Maybe it's not taking a risk, but it's something different that maybe you haven't done before.
Well, years ago, I was in Chicago with some friends. We were eating at a Thai restaurant, and the menu was not in English. It had pictures, right? So we were all picking things in the menu, and the person that was waiting on us did not speak English. Have no idea how we landed there. Well, I do know the guy that was leading the group took us there, and I picked something that had fish in it, and it was soup. Well, it smelled like an aquarium when it showed up. Warm aquarium. Oh. And I actually ate a little bit of it. And we have experiences like that really make a big impact on us. So there's nothing wrong with not being curious about things that you don't want to be curious about, right? But it's also being aware of how that affects others around you. But I want to go back to something that's even more important than food and that kind of stuff. I want to talk about clarity of purpose. Like I had a serious discussion with a close friend on Wednesday night, and we're talking about who I am. And she's like, you've got such clarity, Dan, about who you are. You know your purpose. You know where you're going. You know what you want. You know who you are. I'm very well defined. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not always adjusting some of those things, but that clarity took me a while to get there by getting rid of the things that were influencing me that I didn't want to influence me, like the social realm or people who were, sometimes I had a tendency to be like the person that I was around. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. You have decided who I want to be. You just flow with those things, but you still have a great yes and you have an awesome no. Otherwise, you're not really who you want to be.
When it comes to intentionality, just rewinding to what we said before, you should set the intention, so to speak, for the day, where you want it to go, how you want it to go.
Oh, great lead in. I do almost a daily journal, and I ask myself 3 questions. Now I rotate through these questions, but typically the first question is who needs me today? Who do I need to reach out to? And this comes very specifically from some training from Brendon Burchard. Who needs me today? Who can I reach out to? Number 2 is, what feeling do I want to cultivate today, right? Is it joy? Is it curiosity? Is it being alive? Is it being present? Is it feeling like I'm just enamored with something? Do I want to read something out of joy? Do I want to see a movie and have this experience of being like in this place where I'm experiencing something like in a social realm or a play, whatever that stuff is, or a concert? If I choose the emotion in the middle, at the beginning of my day, then it's going to show up, right? And the third thing is, how do I want to feel about myself at the end of the day? And those are 3 things. If you answer those or ask those early on in the day, it'll set your intention. We talked about routine, if you remember correctly before, and that routine for me is the 20-20-20, which is where part of that is you sit down and you're actually thinking about the day.
So I'm going to share with you real quick. Hang on one second. Mm-hmm. And this is what I need to change in my life. So this is one of many journals that I have. And I know it's probably backwards. This was randomly sent to me by the Girl Scouts because I'm on the board. Cool. Yeah. And it was just that, they sent it to a bunch of people, but my goal was to journal. And it says courage, confidence, character. If I open this up, it's empty. I talk about journaling all the time. I have probably 4 journals that I've bought and I haven't started. It's so important, isn't it? The journal.
It's so important. As a matter of fact, it's so important that if you don't write it out, it's not going to work. There's magic behind writing and how it impacts your day. Now, let's talk about clarity for just a moment. I have 3 words that define me. You just mentioned 3 words there, right? Mm-hmm. I am passionate, I'm alive, and I live abundantly are my 3 words that I have decided define who I am. Passionate, alive, and living abundantly.
I think we all need to just take a second, either now or later, and think about the 3 words that you want to define you.
Well, that's part of this process. When I'm working with someone, about the second or third week, pretty early on, we start focusing on how they want to define themselves. Because if they don't know where they're going, we're not going anywhere, right? We can solve problems all we want to, but the goal here is they're with me because they want to land somewhere. So let's pick that landing, and then we're going to work through the emotions along the journey.
You know what's interesting? In my journey, I know where I want to go. I know what I want. I can see it, the direction, which is all good. At least I think I have it. But when you ask me those three words, I don't know. I would have to do some soul searching. It would take some time. And because I feel like I know the direction I want, those words don't come on automatically.
Let me give you how you can do that real quick, right?
Please.
You pick a word, and then this is what I want to define myself because, and then you write a paragraph about why you're picking that word. So that's all you do. Just pick one word. Now you can change those words along the journey, and that's really what it's about too, because things change along the way. But I'm picking this word because, and if you write a paragraph about why that fits you, that kind of cements it on the inside of you.
Right. And I'm sure all of us, if we were to think about it, probably have three words that we think would fit, but maybe we're not 100% sure. But to your point, when you write them down, now it's staring you in the face, and then you can decide whether it fits you.
Well, we're going to go back to what your brain is thinking about is how you behave. So if you begin to focus on these words, like I put them on my phone every day about 3, every day about 6, they show up on my phone. It's a little reminder. And so here I am, I remind myself, right? And so my brain unconsciously is always working on being abundant, right? Feeling alive.
Wow. What a great idea. I mean, we set timers, and, I'm going to, Dan Clark pops up on my phone. It's supposed to be at a certain time. So I'm going to ask you, Dan, abundant, define that. How does that define you?
Well, it starts out with being abundant on the inside of me. I feel abundant. If you spend time with me, I'm alive. I'm present. You know that I'm with you. I'm not distracted. I'm not doing something where you don't feel like you're with me. So my abundance for me is giving my whole self into everything that I'm doing, very much into that. I don't know about owning things or having things. I live a humble life. So I really focused on who I am and how I want to present myself. I want to feel like I have everything that I need. I am so satisfied and happy with life. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have struggles, because those things show up. But when they show up, I never push them away, because that's part of living abundant. If I'm not having unpleasant emotions, then I can't have pleasant ones. So abundant to me is this full life.
It's interesting, because if you ask other people, abundant means money, abundance, right? Doesn't need to. So how do you, what's your key to, and you just said it before, seconds ago, when you're living your life and you live, by the word abundant or abundance, things show up, things happen, may not be good things. How do you get past them?
Well, again, I know you've heard the name Brene Brown. She has some great material out there, and she talks about, we always hear the term to live life without regrets. And I'm kind of in this mode where I have some regrets, but I don't want to have too many of them. If I'm living with the choice to not have regrets, what that means is that I'm going to make choices. Well, let me think that in a different way. It's okay to have regrets, but if you don't take risks, you're going to have regret. So at the end of our life, most of us feel like that we need to be accomplishing things, right? But regrets are about relationships. They're about your family. It's about who loves you at the end of life. So I'm focusing on, there's things I wish I would have done business-wise and some other things in my world, but I do not want to live without regret with my family or my children or those who love me or are close to me. That's friendship. I was just discussing that again this morning about how important friendships are, and being able to be present and abundant in those relationships, that they are giving you what you really need, and you're getting from them, and you're giving them what truly makes relationships flourish and feel like you are alive and present, and I love you.
It's so important. And it's a friend said to me last year about relationships, and if they don't serve you, you have to make sure they serve you. And it almost sounds kind of self-serving, but at the same time, if it's not, then it's time to move on from them.
Brene Brown's new book on the Atlas of the Heart is fantastic. I didn't get into chapter 4 yet because chapter 3 is so great. And she talks about that very thing, learning how to be in a place where if relationships aren't working, why do we spend energy in relationships that don't work for us? Doesn't mean that relationships are difficult, but if they're harming you intentionally, you kind of move on from them.
Or if you're not growing, if it's not working for you, why you could be taking the time with somebody else instead of, with a relation. And I don't mean, romantic relate, just friends. Could be a friend that just doesn't do it for you, or they bring you down.
They do bring you down. And that gets back to this self-awareness of who you are. I mean, I have focused on being aware of who I am. And here's one of the things that means. That means that if you say to me something that I need to hear that I can correct or be better at, I need to be able to be humble enough to receive that. That's a very quality relationship. Now, it's not about someone dumping on me and saying something they don't like. It's about the idea that I'm always becoming my best self. Owning the unpleasant parts of myself is so valuable in becoming the kind of man or woman or the person that we want to be. And that's where it starts. Who am I? The goodness and the badness.
I've shared with a lot of people what we talked about in one of our first 1 or 2 podcasts, where you asked, when are you living? When are you feeling the most joy? Give us an example. And invariably, most people would say, well, that's when I'm hanging out with this person, or when I'm taking a drive and I'm feeling good. But nobody ever says when I'm feeling sadness and when I'm feeling pain. And if you're not living. You're not living. It's so true.
So true.
Yeah. One other thing, when you use the word humble, somebody said to me once that when you're at your lowest point in life, then you're at the most humble.
It is so true. Humility is owning the things that you don't want others to know. Humility and vulnerability are sisters. And I love that because my willingness to be vulnerable is always humbling. However, being humbled in a way where the world knows who you are is even more humbling. And for example, when you are a public figure, you and I have a tendency to be out there in public, right? We will modify our behavior so that somebody won't see who we might be really when we're in private. And so humility is about willing to be the same person in both places.
Right. And, to your point, sometimes I might post something on Facebook that's kind of revealing, kind of personal, because you got to keep it real when you want to be that way.
Exactly. Yep. And so when we're talking about living abundant, I'm going to go back to that because it kind of stirred me a little bit. It's about how I want to act toward others is also living abundantly. It's being alive and present. What do I want them to get from me? How can I be my purest, healthiest, energetic, childlike, innocent self? And how do I want to serve them?
And yes, you want to have fun, but there are some days where you're maybe not having a great day. Is that still okay in terms of abundance?
Well, that's actually being abundant. Abundant simply means that I'm enjoying the moment abundantly. It's like, for example, I don't want to talk about the national news, but there was a tragedy in my community, and we have just embraced as a community what's been happening here. Is so sad. Some of the tragic things that have been going on here, and the way that our community in this Southwest Missouri, we love and care for each other. The abundance of the joy and the care and being with each other and being able to sustain this difficult time with each other is fascinating to me because it's just how it's like the earth. It's like we are connected to this deeper part of who the world is and the energy in the world. And I love that. That's abundance.
Doesn't it feel good to help out?
Oh my gosh.
Like I was in the parking lot the other day of a supermarket coming out, looking for a cart out of my car. And there was an older woman and she was just emptying the things in her car. And she said, do you want this shopping cart? And I said, well, sure. Yeah, it's right there. And then I looked at her. I said, can I help you with anything? And she goes, yeah, you can. Can you help me load these in? I'm like, of course. And I would do that for 1 million people over and over. But I will say this. If you went back maybe 20 years, 10 years of my life, I probably wouldn't seek those people out. And I don't know why. It's because maybe I wasn't living in the moment.
Well, it's also kind of this transition that you've been on because as we get older, we become more self-aware of how much we really love others. It's just loving them. It's just showing up and saying, oh, and when you ask someone about helping them, like this lady that you were there with, that's because her heart was so alive to be willing to hear that. You had the energy exchange and you were able to do that. That's fascinating. I love that about you, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're welcome. A lot of it comes from you. This is where I'm learning. I'm learning from the master over here. He is your life coach. Tell everybody if they want to work with you. There is no, and I'm going to say this, there's no life coach out there like Dan, because he gets to the most important thing, and that is your emotions. Your emotions drive everything.
Thank you, Steve. Well, it's transformedlife.net. Would love to work with you. Just get a hold of me and we can sure do an hour visit and find out whether we're a good connection. But I know that you will never be disappointed with me. I promise.
I don't think so. And talking to you and just some of the thoughts that you have. What's your intentionality for today?
Well, first of all, stay warm. It's a little cold. And I'm going to put my head down today and kind of just take care of myself. I'm going to take a little bit of time off today, not work. Probably not going to go outside a lot. I want to ride and read and spend time with my beagles and just enjoy the day and have this feeling that I'm taking care of me.
Yeah. We could do a whole half hour on just self-care. It's so important. Dan, as always, great talking with you.
Thank you, Steve.
Look forward to catching up again, and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.